Well, my name is Shelby Bruce. I am the Director of Strategic Accounts at TechnologyAdvice. I'm thrilled to be here with you guys tonight. I work with a couple of you guys in the room, and I've partnered with cybersecurity marketers for the better part of the last decade, really helping you guys turn content into pipeline. So over the next 20 minutes, we are going to chat content strategy and demand gen. But first, why does this conversation matter? Well, marketers, all of us, are under an extraordinary amount of pressure, probably more than we ever have been. This is nothing that you guys don't already know, but you're being held to produce ROI. You are navigating this pieced together media landscape. You're managing rising costs and somehow supposed to deliver this seamless buying experience for everybody in the buying committee. Oh, and by the way, your CEO gave you $5 and a smile to do it, right? Sound familiar? Yep. So that's where we come in. If you're not familiar with us yet, we are TechnologyAdvice. We are one of the world's largest B2B media tech publishers in the world. We own and operate over 30 different trusted media brands like eSecurity Planet, CIO Insight, DZone, and Tech Republic, just to name a couple. And we serve over 100 million tech professionals globally. And so really what that means for you guys is, we own our audience. And why that's important is because we are able to collect some really powerful insights into what buyers are consuming in terms of content, what content is resonating, right? What they're engaging with, but what buyers are actually signaling in our ecosystem, and more importantly, where they are in their buying journey. And so what really sets us apart is our ability to, one, have that owned audience, but also combining it with Studio A, which is our in-house content studio. We have over 200 writers, analysts, and researchers who are helping brands like you guys help put out content that is engaging and resonating and actually driving results across the funnel, not just at that consideration stage when somebody's ready to purchase, but actually earlier in that buying process when influence matters. And so over the past 10 years, I've worked with companies like CyberGRX to help them drive a 20 times ROI, clients like Rapid7 to help them with their full funnel strategy, also cater to your technical buyers or your technical users and also your executive buyers, and companies like Sophos to help them expand their lead gen globally into LATAM, APAC, and EMEA. So I've worked with a lot of different security marketers over the years, and I'm really excited to be here and discuss with you guys. But at the end of the day, the reason that security marketers win with us specifically is because of our editorial trust, our buyer behaviors, and our unique ability to actually take those insights and activate them into full funnel, multi-channel campaigns that actually drive pipeline and revenue. So I'm really excited to dive into this conversation. I want to introduce our panelists really quick. Michelle, we'll start with you if you just want to introduce yourself, where you work, and what you do.
Great, thanks. I'm Michelle Zapula. I work with Sempris. I manage the marketing ops, website, creative, pretty much don't touch content marketing, writing of it, but I work with the content marketers to get it out there. So it's how I know Shelby, and kind of catch all of all the things. I don't touch PR analyst or field marketing anymore, but I touch everything else. So that's why it's so important to how we deal with content.
And I am Gerard Challo. I'm with a company called Fortra. I run marketing for our largest business unit, data protection. So I do kind of the A to Z of all the things marketing, work with some of our shared services team. So what doesn't come from my team are things like PR, design, and marketing ops, because that's part of the corporate team. But beyond that, my team and I handle general marketing for our BU.
Love it. If you want to hit the next slide, we'll jump right in. With this first one, let's start with a bigger picture overview. There's been so many shifts in the cybersecurity buying behaviors and how people choose to do their research. So based on some of those, how has your approach to content changed over the last couple of years? What are you really focused on in 2025?
Yeah. So if you read a lot of the surveys that are coming out, they're talking about how the modern buyer is looking to do a lot of their own research, learn a lot on their own before they even contact the vendor. So they're educating themselves before they even fill out one of those contact forms and that we all have on our website. So a lot of what we've been doing is to ungate the vast majority of our content. So while we've got some really strong content, a lot of it has been, let's face it, while it's educational and meant to talk to our ICP and educate them on a particular topic, a lot of it is self-serving, right? It's written in a way that puts us in a good light. So you want to read about us? Have at it. Here you go. We're even to the point where we've mention that in our ads. I forget the exact way we phrase it, but basically read this ebook, read this guide without needing to hand over, your name or what have you. And then we'll just use the landing page where that guide lives to bounce some remarketing ads off of and that sort of thing. So it's worked out very well for us. Another trend, I don't necessarily think it's a trend, but one thing that we've done is learn not to, I don't know what the right word here is, but be condescending to our audience. So we put together these guides, and I mean, quick show of hands, who here markets to a CISO? Who includes a CISO in their ICP? A lot of people, right? These are people that in many cases have a lot more experience in their respective industries and their respective roles than we do in our industries and our roles. And then we talk to them in an elementary way. Like, what if people came to us and said, with more leads, you could build more pipeline? You'd be like, well, no shit. Yeah, I'm going to write you off. Like, great. So we try not to speak to them in an elementary way. Like there's certain things that, we don't need to define certain acronyms. We don't define ATM. People know what an ATM machine is, but we define some of these industry standard acronyms, and we don't need to talk about, well, here's the value of this. We're coming at you expecting that you understand that. So we try to just elevate our tone a little bit so that we're not speaking down to people. So, I mean, those are at the very high level, some of the things that we've done, I'd say over the past year and a half or so.
Great. And to build on that, I would say the survey bit, right? That's one of the biggest things we've pivoted to is partnering with a survey company that goes out, gets the data. We did a holiday ransomware report that we released in December. And a lot of that, again, was third-party information, data, getting that information from those folks that live it, right? And really highlighting the fact that while it came out in December, it didn't mean holiday, it meant year round. When do all those cyber attacks happen? They happen July 4th. What are the big holidays? Those are the easiest things where people just don't. And those the stats that are in them, the things that are highlighting. It's not the white paper, right? So you can go to multiple parts of your audience with that same report and not gating. I think everybody can probably agree, as much as we'd love to gate something, people are just going to walk away. So just make it available. They're going to find it there, and it's really public information anyway, and just engage them, and they're going to be more willing to, when they see that, okay, these are experts that are saying it. We're not saying we created this report or we did whatever. We're putting the information out there that's important to them. And when you were talking about, I think the CISO, who's the persona? We know white papers are essential to the education process, but that is for a certain persona. If you have a program and you have to get to the technical, the practitioner, those are great, right? But you still have to start somewhere with that brand awareness. And then if you're talking to the CISOs, doing media buys and content, creating the content with third parties where it's CISO takes, right? Getting video footage, things like that. That's a valid piece of content. It's not all about the written piece, right? How are people interacting and how can you get that in front of folks?
That's great. And I think that's a really good, segue into this next one. You touched on survey being a really good one and also ungating. But security marketers are up against so much skepticism, like ad fatigue, and just an overwhelming amount of content. So you mentioned survey. Are there any other pieces of content that you have found very successful, or maybe a content-led program that's worked really well for you over the last 6 or 12 months? What did you learn from that?
Yeah, so I just referenced the holiday report, but we also had done 2 more before that. So I think that model has been working for us, is going out through a third party. Census Wide, I think, is who we most recently used. We have yet another report just released last week, and we have one that's coming up in a week and a half. And that has been kind of just the big piece of that, because then we can break that down. That one piece of content shows up in your slide decks. It shows up in conversations and webinars. So really making sure whatever content we're using has legs to it, it's consistent, and it's also speaking to what people are searching for. You mentioned telling people, like we want to tell them so many things, but we're trying to tell them in our way. And I think as marketers, we always have to take that step back and make sure, are the users asking for this? What are people searching for? What is it? And speaking to them in that way so that they're actually going to find it when they're searching, because they're using the same terms.
So I would say a lot of the type of content, I don't know if it's type, but the nature of the content is taking a tone that's comforting. So in our world, a lot of what we play to is compliance, regulatory compliance. So there's a lot of compliance initiatives that fit right in with our product line. And it's compliance initiatives that our customers right up through the CISOs freak out about. So kind of the tone that we've taken is, don't worry, be cool. We've got this, whether it's an ad or corresponding, content pieces. We've got this. We have the experience. It's not just we've got the product. Here it is, product A. It's here's how we've done it before. Here's who we've done it with. We've got the expertise. Be cool. Like we'll work together on this. So I'd say that's a big part of it. And that's how the ads and the content itself work together. Um, yeah, I think that's what I've got.
That's good. Yeah. We're also seeing a lot of just bite-sized content, places where you can repurpose, right? Like LinkedIn and passing to sales enablement or whatever it may be, just pieces you can repurpose. So I love that as well. I'll move on to the next one. And are you guys using any partners or any third-party media vendors to help get that great content out in front of new audiences? Maybe it's a content syndication vendor, maybe it's newsletters. What's worked really well for you guys, and how did you approach that? Because working with media partners can be a battle, but can you talk a little bit about what that was for you guys?
Yeah. So for us, we I work for a company called Fortra, and we are a product of many different acquisitions, and those are global acquisitions. So we grew from a little company that was based out of Minneapolis, Minnesota. No, that's not where I'm from. Um, Minneapolis, Minnesota, that now has offices in Dubai and China and places I've never even heard of. And all of a sudden, you have to market to those audiences and to those areas. And while we felt we had a pretty good grasp internally on some content creation for a North American market, and for the most part for English speaking, for other cultures, we started working with content agencies, either whether it was language specific or really just getting it in the tone of that geography. So one area that's really come in handy is a lot of not just something that's written by us, but a one of those pieces that's like how 7 different CISOs weigh on this topic, or 7 different, it's always the number 7. Like you can't, people are afraid of round numbers, but it's always something like X number of this type of expert weigh in on this topic. So in order to not have everybody based out of, all these experts mysteriously based out of Minnesota or be American, we'll work through content syndication, not content creators, to get localized experts and SMEs that lend their opinion, and it's worked out fantastic for us. So we've built some really nice guides that aren't even, of course they're Fortra branded as they need to be, but they aren't overly over the top. Like here's why Fortra was the best. It's other people weighing in on where they think the industry is going, and that's performed really well for us.
Yeah. So one of the things you talked about is like localization. So when I was talking about these guides that, well, not guides, but surveys, is having excerpts for your different regions, right? So localizing that, extracting the data from the surveys that mean something to someone in the UK or into Australia. And that has done wonders for the teams, right? It gives your sales team confidence, but also shows the prospects and customers that like we are tuned into what's happening in your local area. So I think that's another thing that you can do. And by doing that, right, is the placements, working with various agencies. When we chatted about this, I had the fortune of working with TechnologyAdvice, eSecurity Planet, doing some programs with them. And I think it's really important setting the tone when you go into that partnership, right? It is a partnership. And we all know that, certain parts of it is for brand awareness, right? And you have your content pieces going out for that. But then there's, if you're using the demand gen, right? There's always the content syndications, which is important to get your word out there. But 9 out of 10 times you pass that lead on to BDRs, and the BDRs are like, they don't know what I do. They have no idea who we are. And you have to make sure you're coaching the BDRs, right? Making sure that, the team that you're working with helps you brief them. What is the process? How is that lead coming through? Calling those things out. And I think that's of a great value. One of the things we worked with Shelby on was, and we do this with other vendors as well, is that if it is let's say a lead guarantee, making sure you're building things into your contract that if a lead is invalid, right? You've tried, you've reached out, this doesn't exist, go back and they'll replace it, right? You have to set the standards, which is either put it in the contract, but your team's been great about that. It doesn't happen that often, but it happens frequently enough, right, that we need to do that. So I think, again, that partnership of figuring out what we're trying to do now and who we're trying to speak to and which content's going to match, and we, enabling our teams so that they can feel confident about the flow that's coming in from some of the syndications or digital placements that we're doing, and just reminding the sales teams, just because that came in. I have seen some of the leads from programs we've done for content syndication, they don't pop till a year and a half later. right? Like that's why it's important to have it in I'm an analytics person, so have it in Salesforce so you can actually see that and see the track, right? Like just because it's a lead gen program doesn't mean it's going to turn right away, right? And those touch points at those accounts are super important because you're laying that foundation for them to realize, and just that repetitiveness, right? It's almost indirect, it's subtle. If they see it and see you kind of popping up indirectly as you come through these things, that definitely helps.
Add on that because you bring up a really good point. You can't hand me a mic. There's a point that's you bring up that's so important and so often overlooked, which is who often is going to be the ones that follow up on something like a content download. It's going to be the BDRs. How often do the BDRs follow up on a content piece lead that they have never read, they've never even heard of, and they don't have the context when they follow up? It's just like, you're a lead, I got your name, like, what's up? So preparing your pre-sales team or whoever's following up on that lead, you don't have to read the whole thing because we know you're not going to, but here's the Cliff Notes version of it. If they're downloading it, it's made for this audience. If they're downloading it, they're probably interested in this, this, and this. At least have an opening line to reference and make it seem like you've heard of this piece before. So preparing that team with new content, you brought that up, and it's so often overlooked, and it's so frustrating, but it goes a long way.
It's really good. Yeah, I think there's been a trend over the last, we'll call it 6-7 years, right? Where we're seeing a lot of maybe database aggregators where they're really trying to get to the lowest CPL and just sell you lead like good luck, bye. You guys demand more out of your demand gen partners. Like it's okay for you to ask more out of your partners to help make sure that your teams are set up for that, or make sure that your back is covered, right? At the end of the day, that's your media partner's job, is to make you a smarter marketer. So don't be afraid to hold them to that. We actually, shameless plug, we brought some little checklists for you guys. It's 25 questions to ask your lead gen provider before you hire them. And this is non-biased to us. Of course, we're going to check these boxes, right? But like, it's questions like, do they own their audience? And can you actually pull up a site where you can see that they own, and just things like that? And what is their team made up of? Just to make sure that your partners really have your backs and ultimately are there to drive success, not just like sell you some leads and have a good day. So this has been a really great conversation. I think we've got some time for Q&A or any questions. Yeah.
Hi. Question around the ungating, right? That's been like a trend, but I've never successfully sold that to leadership. Like, can you talk about what you're ungating and what you're gating? Like, are you gating your reports? Are you ungating your reports? No?
Everything's ungated. So everything for us is pretty much ungated, right? The only thing that we had to fight, we actually have a tool called Purple Knight, which is a security assessment tool that people can download for free. They didn't even want us putting a gate on that. And we're like, we need to communicate with people when things come out. So that was a battle. So we had the opposite, where our management's like, no, it's good for everyone. Just let them use it. And, we found that ground. I think if you go to our website, maybe 1 or 2 things are gated, and that might be because it's a requirement of like Forrester or Gartner or so on or so forth, who basically say to have rights to this, you have to have it gated, right? That's not every case, but those do come up. Really you're using webinars or events is where your form and your information is, right? And if like we've all heard, people do so much research, and this is where those intent-based platforms become really important. Like, what are people searching? What are those keywords? Where are they consuming? What type of stuff are they consuming? So that we can know and get out in front of them to put these awareness pieces. Because at the end of the day, what is it hurting you not to collect their information? If anything, it's getting it out there faster, and they're more likely to come back and raise their hand. So I'm fortunate, but I've been in that situation because our content team is like, no, gate it. And, the SEM is like, no, we're not gating this. We're making it available because it's useful to people. So if we actually position it and say, it's useful, right? What is this doing? If you're just doing this to try to get a lead because you think it's going to go in pipeline, you're still going to get the lead at some point. It's at which point they raise their hand.
And how are you navigating, sorry, another thing, like a decline in leads, like top of funnel?
Yeah. So that's a real good question. You should definitely challenge us on the ungating claim. So as soon as we're done here, I'm about to go up, order a Guinness. A Guinness is a lot like ungating, and it's not for everybody. So you have to figure out who your audience is. My last company, I was marketing to completely different audience, architects. big part of our audience was architects, and they ate up content. I would have done myself a disservice at that point to have ungated our content, but we market to cybersecurity different. So first thing first, I mean, go and pull your data. Like, are you getting leads that are going? I mean, you're getting leads. People are filling out the forms. Where are they going? Use that to support your decision. You also mentioned you might have to justify this to someone who's perhaps outside of marketing, executive team. I didn't have that challenge. You probably didn't have that challenge. Like it's, so if you have to justify this to someone outside of marketing, I think at least having a plan and talking about what you're going to do in place of ungating, talking about, people are still going to come to this page. They're going to learn about us. We're going to then be able to identify people that come here, and maybe it works into your ABM plans. Maybe, there's remarketing that you can run against it. Maybe there's other things you could do with clicks to that page, but it's something that plays out over time. You can't just 2 days later come back and say, we ungated everything and look at the results. So unfortunately it does take time and it takes patience. But start with pulling your data. You might be developing fantastic leads from some of these forums. Don't ungate it.
So actually, I'm going to add on to that. I think what's kind of also interesting is I totally forgot what I was going to say.
You're thinking about it.
Yeah, no, yeah, I know. I was like, oh, that sounds good. So I think on the gating side of things too is if you look at what you've gated, like you're saying, the data, what is the performance, right? It hasn't gone anywhere, right? When knowing the journey, that's what I was going to say. You were saying, looking at all, like what are the clicks, where it retarget, but what are you trying to do with that piece? If you look at it in isolation and throw a gate on it, what are you doing to engage them after, now that you have the information? Is it already laid out? Because a lot of times we have these pieces and they go quickly and you don't have the luxury of time because they're a response to an attack that just happened and people need to know how to deal with it. You're getting stuff out there quickly, right? So if you don't have it built into something and you're just throwing up a gate because you put a value on it, it's all about that value. And I had mentioned that a lot of times the content marketers wanted it gated, but when we chat through, they're like, oh, okay, that makes sense, right? But it's everybody taking a step back and looking at it and even asking them, how often do you fill out a form? Right? Like how many of us skip it? That's like put them in that situation, and they may still be like, I fill out forms every day. Good for you. Do you put the right information in, or do you put junk mail in there just so you can download it? Like a lot of us now, if you're dealing globally, you have all sorts of GDPR and all sorts of compliance things. So that's part of the other thing for ungating, right? Like you're getting the content out there and you're not necessarily dealing with, now what do I do with this? Am I allowed to email them? Am I not allowed to email? Now they're reporting me and I have to do all these other things. So there's other benefits to doing that as well.
And if your BDR team are following up on these leads, they're not going anywhere, how much time are they wasting? What's the value of that time? What else could they be doing? So there's a cost there.
All right. So I had a question about AI. Something you guys probably have heard of. How have you guys been utilizing it in your content process? Is it a part of your content process? Do you have strict rules and regulations about it? Yeah. Just would love to hear people actually how it's working at their particular, spaces.
So we have organizational, we're supposed to be using Copilot, right? That is what's approved. Given that we're in cybersecurity, all of these different tools, there's always things that, everybody's got freeware. So we do use Copilot. We use it mostly for different people use it differently, but there's an encouragement to play around with it and see what it does. I think we use it for copy, for like that responsive copy, right? When you're trying to do a bunch of social posts and things like that, sometimes it comes out great, sometimes not so much, right? But it gives ideas too. So I think if you're playing around with AI, it's giving you some things and you're like, oh wait, yeah, no. But then you're like, oh, that's a good idea, right? Or make this more concise, or do those types of things. That definitely helps with emails, with social, with other things. I don't necessarily use it for long form. I know people who do, and it's more like formatting than some other things, which does help reduce that cycle. So that's what we're doing on our side.
Yeah, we've used it for some blog content around SEO. We've been very careful about mostly when it comes to AI. Most of us, we're all in cybersecurity. There's using it, and then there's messaging on how we prevent, I'm in data protection, how we prevent data egress through AI sites. So the majority of what I've done talking about AI has been AI as the enemy, so to speak, as opposed to AI as a tool. There's a really great quote there, and I can't remember who it's from, and I'm going to butcher it, but the idea here is that, because I butcher everything, but the idea here is that, I want to use AI, I want a tool like AI to, do the dishes and do the vacuuming, as opposed to creating art and music because I want to free up my time to create art and music because AI is doing the dishes and the vacuuming. So that's kind of how the approach that we take is that we use AI not to do the creative for our ads because we've got pretty good designers to do that. And we try not to do too much writing because we've got not just good writers, but we have SMEs that have a background in cyber writing. So we try not to lean too heavily on that, but we'll use it here and there for idea generation, running. I've thrown a few things in there, just saying it, just kind of getting the ball rolling and then sharing it out to my team. Like, AI suggests this. I think it's stupid, but let's build on that and try to take it in a different direction. So I think it's great for just spitballing. But yeah, the majority where we've actually put it into use is through some SEO related blogs where it doesn't have to be too technically in depth. It doesn't have to be too precise. It doesn't have to be written by an SME, but we're going for more an SEO lean here. So.
Thank you, Shelby. On our chat, was it this week or last week? It's all blurring. But we talked about the buying committee. And I really wanted the both of you to kind of dig into this because I know firsthand that that's a challenge. So you do a content syndication campaign or a lead gen campaign with a third-party vendor. You get the leads and your SDRs are calling and they're getting, nope, I never downloaded that, or I don't know about so-and-so company. You mentioned a great idea and best practices of like, how could you still make the most of that lead or at least that logo and get somewhere else? So tell us about what your advice there.
Yeah. So I think, again, that comes down to making sure when people do the outreach, they're making the connection to that third party. You own your audience. They know tech advice. They know these sites that they're going to. And if you come out hot, right, like not making the connection for the end user or for the lead, and you'd say, okay, and they may forget. And sometimes that usually jogs their memory. And I've heard BDRs and sellers come back and say, yeah, as soon as I said that, then they recalled what it was, right? So making sure that that's important because they do trust you, right? Which is why we're using you and going to those audiences. Part of it is, what is it part of the ABM program? So if you did get a lead and you've worked with these vendors and you're going after the ABM, you might not be the right person, but then who's in that sphere? Right. So the BDR now has information to go in and look to see who's connected or who, go to your data enrichment software where they can find, okay, who's in that sphere and reach out. So you can use that data in many different ways. It's just, how resourceful folks get. But part of that is coaching.
Yeah, I don't have too much clever to say beyond what you just did. No, a lot of what we've done is just refocusing our efforts to generate the highest possible intent leads that we can. And in our world, that means scheduling a demo. That majority of what it is scheduling a demo. So that's partly why we've ungated a lot of our assets is to include them as something higher in the funnel that we can just slowly take people through the tunnel because it takes 7 to 12 different touches for the brand to actually get somewhere. Ultimately, so when somebody actually comes through, that obviously is not ungated. That's someone raising their hand that's touched our brand a number of different times, hopefully read a number of our different ungated materials, seen us on social media, had some of our ads served to us, so on and so forth, and finally is comfortable enough with us that they say, I'm ready for a demo. And here I am. This is my name. I'm ready to the point where, I'm going to give you my name and my, my blood type and everything that we asked for on these forms. So for us, it becomes less of a challenge. If you really, we preach it all the time, but it's quality over quantity. And our sales team kind of is like, that's a load of shit. That just means you're going to give me less leads, but really.
Yeah. Part of that though too is that you're nurturing them properly, right? Like we've referenced the BDR portion of this, but if we're marketers, we're going to put them in there into our nurtures. Are they healthcare? Let's talk to them about healthcare, what their pain points in healthcare are. So they're not, we know people are less likely to respond, but if you watch that history, I go through some of these when we're auditing for quarterly reports, and you can see kind of like this person keeps opening the emails, but it takes like 20 emails before they actually respond. But as long as you're putting a valuable message in front of them, so making sure they get in the right nurture. What type of piece did they come in? Did they interact with something else? Make sure that they're getting that. Invite them to a local event, right? Like if we know that's there, they're now in the database. So just handling them with care, not to just like blast them, because we all want to make sure that like you don't want your unsubscribe rates to go up. Marketo, we have it set that no person can get more than 2 emails in a 7-day period, right? Which means you're going to fall out of the parameters for other emails, and our marketers having that conversation. Can you cross promote? Can you do this? Is this the right time? They just came into the database. They may only be on one track for 30 days, right? Let that develop, let that touch happen. So it's all in, I think, what you do with that going forward. Not, there's the manual part of it, there's the automated part of it, but I think there's opportunities there.
Yeah. And I think, Shelby, you mentioned kind of like a campaign kit that you also work with, right? The marketing teams on whether it's swipe copy or training for the SDRs before the campaign goes live, but just like making sure that you answer every possible question so that the leads can actually turn into something.
Yeah, I mean, we know not all leads are created equal, right? Somebody who's come into your contact us or a demo page is very different than, let's say, a content syndication lead who they've engaged with a white paper, but your BDR is like, they don't know who we are. Probably, because if they're in research mode, they're not specific on brands, right? And so I think one thing that's important, and something that's really important to us, is anybody we're working with, let them know what that lead journey has looked like, right? It's not going to be the exact same for every lead, but one thing that I think really helps us to make teams successful is once we've sold that campaign before it launches, we're hopping on a best practices call with either their SDR team, BDR team, if they'll allow it, or recording them something, or we're handing them a best practices guide that's giving them not advice on how to sell your solution. You guys are obviously the experts in that, but here's how to get the most out of this type of lead, given the journey they've gone through so far, and here's where they came from in their very early in the stage, right? I think another thing you can do is add on some insights, right? When you're working with a partner who owns their audience, we have the insights in what they engaged with, how many things they've engaged with, what topics, what types of, like, you name it. And so we can pass that along to teams with leads so your team knows what their challenge is or who they're using or maybe where they're in the buying journey so they can personalize that follow-up a little more to that buyer, right? That's if you have the bandwidth. But if not, toss them into a marketing nurture that's relevant, whether it's pain point specific or something that's going to warm them up. So you're not taking those manual BDR hours and then they're pissed off, not working the rest of your leads. There goes your marketing dollars. So I think working with your partner to teach your team, here's where the leads come from and here's what to expect. Here's how long that should take. Not every person's answering your phone call, whatever it is. We're whale hunting, right? That's what content syndication is for, is finding those massive deals, a couple of them that are going to pay for that campaign 10 times over. So the biggest thing is just setting the proper expectations with the team on what success looks like and how long that should take and when to raise a red flag versus when to just keep your head down and keep working,